Thank you. First of all, just to be precise, he's not missing in action. He was abducted and kidnapped by the Hamas terrorist organization. And I'd like to applaud Miri. Miri, I don't know how you did it so eloquently and so comprehensive. But as Jewish people, when they talk about a subject, two people, they have five different opinions. So I'll just add two things, if I may, just to comment on what you were able to describe. One, yes, Israel has two objectives. One is the destruction of Hamas, and two is the release of the hostages. Those timelines don't always meet. So one thing is important, and the other thing is urgent. See my thought? I don't have time. So as Miri said, this thing could go on for months. It's been 75 days. I don't have much longer. And I don't want my kid in the bag. I want him alive. How do we make that happen? And the other thing, really, I'd like to just add, I'm sure you have a pretty good view on it. Quoting President Biden from last week when we met him, talking to him, don't give up, hope. And hope was a part of the equation, at least the US administration believes in. And it's not just hope for us, but also hope in the region itself. And without having an alternative for that hope, for a better future, then we lost to the extremists. So there needs to be that component as well in your overview of what does that mean and how could that look like. President Biden believes very much that the attack was a subset of the discussion going on with Saudi and creating economic projects in the Middle East, which was an incentive for those attacks to come out, but that's a different topic. So let me introduce myself. I'm a New Yorker. Grew up on the streets of Flatbush in Brooklyn. That's where the accent is, so people don't think I'm from Montana. I like to say proud outcome of the New York public education system. Came out a bit rough on the edges, but I hope not too shabby. I moved to Israel with my family at the age of 12. So did high school, Boy Scouts, the IDF, so that turned me more or less into an Israeli. But moved back to the States, did New York University, but also worked for the American Zionist Youth Foundation, telling US teenagers what a wonderful place Israel is. Started to believe the stuff that I was talking about. Went back here, met my wife. My wife is the daughter of a El Al pilot. So she basically traveled with her father all across the globe. And she told me, look, if you want to keep this thing going, then you need to come to the conclusion that this is the best place to live and this is where we're going to have a family. So those more or less are my negotiation skills, as I've been living in Tel Aviv for about 25 years. I have three sons. The eldest actually is an IDF soldier as well in a elite technology unit. Itai is the middle one. And always, I don't know about you guys, but the middle, child, the sandwich, is always the unique one inside of the family that needs to connect between the eldest and the youngest. So that's where Itai is very much missed inside of my family. And Alon is the youngest, and he celebrated his bar mitzvah about a month and a half ago. And we, of course, had a lot of thoughts about how and if we should do that bar mitzvah, but at the end, we reached the conclusion that Alon spent so much time studying for the bar mitzvah, and he should have a positive recollection of that event, regardless of what happens with us. So actually, the bar mitzvah was more of a spiritual thing. We had people coming in from all over, just wanted to give us a hug. The rabbi said, it was more packed than Yom Kippur. And we had that bar mitzvah and hope to have it again soon. Thank you for the congratulations. And our life kind of stopped 75 days ago. So that morning, Itai is in a unit that is tanks. So he is stationed at the border of Gaza. For you, I do not need to explain, but just to emphasize, he is protecting a sovereign part of the land of Israel that is not in some sort of international conflict. He is protecting agricultural communities, what we call kibbutz, people that work the land, simple folk that try to make ends meet. That morning, we got contact from him in the morning, 6:30, saying the base is under some sort of missile attack. But unfortunately, we've been accustomed to having those types of messages from people living in the South. And we kept on our regular Saturday routine. But after a couple of hours and not being able to contact him and other people that were with him, we understood things might be a bit different. And then the videos started coming out. That's when we started, as we would say in New York, shitting in our pants. And we waited, another day, and we went to the police headquarters that was put together, and our son was defined as missing in action, meaning nobody knew where he was in the field. No one could identify him. He wasn't in one of the hospitals, and he wasn't on any of the deceased lists. A couple of days passed by. 6 o'clock in the morning, we get a knock on the door. I look inside of the keyhole and see two officers, army officers. I do not wish my biggest enemies to feel what I felt. You basically want those people to go away. You want them to disappear. You don't want to open that door. But at the end, you need to come back to reality, and you need to find that courage somehow to open that door. And you have the two guys looking at you, and they say, calm down, calm down. So the good news, so to speak, is your son has been identified as being abducted, kidnapped by a savage terrorist organization called Hamas. And that's the good news. I don't need to tell you what the bad news is. And that was about 70 days ago. We do not have sign of life. We have, unfortunately, been in constant contact with the International Red Cross. That I'd like to remind everybody that they have a permanent mandate by the international community, international law, to visit any individual that is under distress, being held captive, a victim of violent actions, any place, anywhere. They claim that that is not possible. There has been no ability to receive medical attention. There have been organizations such as Doctors Without Borders wishing to get in to Gaza, again denied by the Hamas terrorist organization. And we've been living basically in some sort of hell. Well, it's actually more than that. It's a different type of universe. So I've been transported to a different universe from October 7th, where time works a bit differently. You wake up in the morning, you try to figure out what's going on, and then you get that slap of reality saying, yeah, it's actually happening again. And you try to do whatever you can to bring somehow my son back home. And after working 16, 17, 18 hours, and you try to ask yourself a simple question. Okay, have you been productive in moving the release of your son 1 inch? And you don't have a good answer. And that's what's been going on for 75 days. And despair is on my shoulder, looking at me, trying to take over my soul and my wife and my family, as well as the other families of hostages. And it's unbearable to continue to live like this. And I go back to my clock, where We know the hostages said, well, released, that they have been tortured, not just the women, men as well. Conditions are not conditions, even though the Israeli IDF is trying to do whatever it can to get the hostages out and not harm them. It's a very difficult task. And the question is how to come to a resolution that enables us to be whole again and get our loved ones that are held hostage back alive, with the emphasis of alive. So we understand, going back to Millie's overview, that this land exercise is indeed a lever to get the hostages out, but what we do not want is to see hostages left back. And we are urging everyone, from the Israeli government to the US government to everybody else, we need all the hostages out now, because if we keep on going on the salami, that's what Hamas wants. And we need to get everybody out, because 75 days living like that is unbearable. I hope to thank my kid. Itai, he's a very talented kid. Like, as a Jewish father, I'm sure all of you, given the opportunity to talk about your children in front of a captive audience, you could talk about them for hours. So I'll try to speak shortly about him and just say he typically is the life of the party. You know, he dances, he sings, and the only way I kind of am able to cope with the fact that he's being held hostage is that hopefully he knows how to do a lot of magic with cards. So hopefully someone gave him a deck of cards and he's playing cards with some other folks, buying time, and hopefully getting it one day at a time. What we need from you guys. So as a US citizen, we kind of came together, the US citizens, immediately after October 7th, and we did a press conference, so the administration knew about us. We had a phone call where we met, actually, Secretary of State Blinken, like 2 days after. We were privileged to have a Zoom call with the President of the United States that week. It was supposed to be a Zoom call of 15 minutes with all of the families. After 15 minutes, one of the aides wanted to kind of move the president to the next topic. And he looked at him and he said, last time I checked, I'm the president of the United States, and I'll say when this meeting ends. And he stayed on the call with us for an hour and a half. And it was imperative for him to convey the message that there's nothing more important to him than this topic of the hostages, specifically the US hostages. We've been mobilizing ourselves to be in the US as much as possible. The last month I've been in the US 3 times. I only do Washington. If someone here is from Washington, we'll be glad to meet him next time, where we are meeting congressmen, the administration, and had the opportunity last week, as I mentioned, the President of the United States himself spent time with us. Again, 45-minute meeting that kept on for about an hour and a half. And at the end, he kind of said to us, you have something else after this? We were like, no. So he said, okay, come with me to the Oval Office, and he gave us a VIP tour. So yeah, just to show he's a mensch. So he sees this as something that he takes very personal, based on his history as well, that has grief in his family. But we need to keep this as much as possible as a bipartisan topic. We also meet the Republican senators. There have been many delegations coming here that has been bipartisan. I met last week Lindsey Graham, Senator Cruz. He himself comes from a family that was held captive in Cuba. And we believe that is one of the pillars of the strategy that we have in order to keep this topic as uh, top of mind of the U.S. People as much as possible. What we need from you is to keep this topic as well in your minds and in your communities. There's only so much that we could do. We are 8 U.S. families. Excuse me, we are 7 U.S. families with 8 U.S. hostages. There's one family that's a couple. And what we need you guys is to give a call after this meeting to your congressman, to your senator. Ask him, what have you done today for the release of the hostages, which is a humanitarian crisis, and specifically the U.S. hostages? And tell him at the end of that call, you know what? I'm going to give you a call, same call tomorrow morning as well. And get them to do whatever possible, either within the administration or outside the administration, to solve this humanitarian crisis. And I agree with Miri that we all feel, for what is happening in Gaza, which is also a humanitarian crisis, that we see hundreds of people killed each day, and this needs to stop. And that's where, let's call it the adults, okay? The US, but also the international community need to represent the hostages. Qatar needs to represent the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and they need to come up with a deal. And that deal needs to go to the children that have been playing for the last couple of weeks, come to some conclusion, again, specifically about the hostages and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. I don't have the answers for the bigger picture, which I totally agree with Miri, which is highly complicated, and that's a little bit above my pay grade. But what I do know is that I don't have any time. And I want to go back to where my life stopped, October 7th, and continue where I was before. I want my family. And what I need from you guys, again, support and conveying to your representatives, we need to get this done. Today, we just had Hanukkah, which is the time of miracle for the Jewish people. We have been praying a lot. It's also, time of the end of the year for Christians as well. Within your community, please convey the message as well. We had an empty seat at our table. Thanksgiving, Hanukkah. Also for the people inside of your community, I would also like to ask them as well in their Christmas dinner, have an empty chair for the hostages. And remember that there are families, U.S. families, okay, that are suffering. And this type of event has not happened since 1979 with the U.S. hostages in Iran. And this needs to come to an end. So it's not a Jewish thing. It's not an Israeli thing. Think of it as a U.S. thing that needs to be solved as well. Thank you, everyone, for your time.